Hello and welcome back to our BNI San Diego podcast. I'm excited. I have one of my regular guests, one of my favorite regular guests, Alex Terranova of Alex Terranova Coaching. Welcome, Alex.
Thanks for having me again. It's
Thank
my
you for joining
my
us.
new home.
Yeah, seriously. I'm enjoying the conversations. They've been a lot of fun, and we're getting a lot of good feedback on the conversations we're having, which means that it's reaching people right where it needs to impact. So it's awesome. So today I'm really excited about our conversation because it's one that I think we as professionals we lose sight of.
hmm
And today our conversation is you're never too successful for the basics. You're never too successful for the basics. What does that mean for you, Alex?
So good. There's I notice in my own business, whether it be with my own coaching practice or with my relationship to BNI, that we do this thing, and I think humans do this thing. I don't think I'm special or my BNI group is special. We do this thing where when we're learning to do something, we've usually been taught by someone or we have some structure that helps us learn something. And we often, most of us will do things the way that we're taught. So when a BNI group is starting, right, we're inviting, we got to get the numbers, we got to get people there. So everybody's really working together to invite and give each other business. And then, group gets to be what, 15, 20, 25 people, somewhere in there. And they start feeling really good about what they've done, which they should feel really good about what they've done.
So we've reached
And
success, so to speak.
yeah. And it was probably exhausting getting there to some degree. And so everybody like takes a unconscious collective sigh of relief that they got there and they start resting. And I believe this is totally subconscious. They start resting on what they've built.
Yeah.
And the visitors probably drop significantly pretty quickly. And the membership doesn't grow anymore like it used to, which nobody is worried about and nobody cares because it got to a number and they all feel like it's great. But over time, everything changes.
Oh,
People
yeah.
have to leave the group, people get
Yeah.
sick, things happen. And all of a sudden, that number 25 is now down to number 18. And now it's a panic because we were never under 20, or we haven't been under 30 or whatever it is. And if that's not attended to right away, it's going to keep dropping. And you've seen that happen,
Oh, yeah.
unfortunately. Um, and now everybody, though, has to restart that motor. They're uncomfortable doing the things that they used to because they stopped doing them.
Hmm?
They don't want to do them because they filled all the time that they used to do that with other
Well,
things.
and also I think to add to that, I think we get to a place where been there, done that.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
I'm better than that now. As a
Mhm.
professional, I've reached a new plateau, so to speak, or a new
Yeah.
a new peak, and I don't want to go back down.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we think too, like, hey, we put in so much work on that thing. I didn't necessarily like the thing that got me. That was like hard or it wasn't fun. And I had to do it, but now maybe I don't have to anymore. And I see the same thing I've seen it in my coaching practice. When I started coaching in 2015, I was doing what my mentors were telling me, and I had to break through a lot of fears to do a lot of the actions, right? Really putting myself out there in the world, coaching a lot of people for free or for not a lot of money, listening to a lot of better coaches than me coach, all these things. And eventually I built. Took a couple of years, but I think in year 2 or 3, I hit like 100,000, six figures. And I kept building. And then I remember somewhere around year 6, I felt really good about what I had built. Now I didn't, and at year 6, I stopped doing a lot of the things that I was doing up until year 6. I stopped necessarily trying to meet new people because I was getting referrals at this point, right? I was getting a lot of referrals. I didn't have to do as much networking and putting myself out there. I stopped offering people to have an experience of working with me to see how they felt about it, see if they liked it, see the impact I could have on them. And all of a sudden, right, for a little while, just like the BNI group, nothing changed. I was still getting referrals. My business kept growing. But then something changed all of a sudden, where all of a sudden the people I had worked with, I have a pretty good track record of people typically work with me for like 2.5 years. And
Good.
this timing is pretty great, right? It's 2006, somewhere in not 2006, my 6th year, but somewhere in my 8th year, my numbers started to trickle just a little bit. And I actually wasn't, hey, this happens, ebb and flow. I wasn't worried about it. I didn't think about it too much. But then and then I'm into year 8. I'm halfway towards year 9. And all of a sudden I'm like, whoa, what happened? My numbers have actually fallen and I can't figure out what happened. And then when I slowed down and took a look, I realized, man, I stopped doing all the things that I had been doing for my first 6 years that I would teach, that I do teach when I mentor new coaches. I teach them to do it. I stopped doing it. And look what happened, right? Like, it's no surprise. And same thing, same exact thing as you said. Oh, I don't want to go do that stuff. I've done that before. I shouldn't have all these silly
All that,
stories.
well, and the words that you just used, I shouldn't have to do that,
Yeah.
right? And
Hmm.
it's really easy because, as you said, what's that term? We rest on our laurels, right?
Yeah.
We take that we we've climbed the mountain and now we're surveying and we're looking at it going, okay, now there's no place but up. And inevitably we're going to go down. We're going to lose clients because it's inevitable. Everybody loses clients. As much as we don't want to face it or believe it, we're going to lose clients and we've got to replenish. So what do we do to create a new mindset of, staying back to the basics, or never leaving the basics? I mean, just continually, going through seasons of always looking back. And as I say this, it made me think of I don't know if I shared with you before, but our keynote speaker and I forget her name and it's going to kill me. And in the show notes, I'll actually put it, um, at our BNI national conference in Las Vegas just a few months ago.
Hmm.
This lady is known around the world as she's hit major milestones as far as like climbing Mount Everest.
Okay.
And she did it while she's had open heart surgery. She's had, multiple heart surgeries and whatnot, but this lady is incredible. And what she
Okay.
talked about, she went through this conversation with us about when you get to base camp.
Hmm.
And base camp is base camp, right? It's where you start everything. And she talked about how there's like 4 or 5 different peaks to get to the top, 3 or 4 peaks to get to the top. And she talked about when you get to base camp, you stay there for a few days to acclimate, and then you go up to the next peak that takes a day or two. And naturally, we all think, okay, you get to the next peak, and that means you automatically go to the next one. And she said, no, you get to the next peak, you stay there for 2 days, and you come back to base camp.
Hmm.
And then you acclimate, you go back up to point number 1, or the first peak, you stay a couple of days there, you go up to the next peak, stay a couple of days, and then guess what? You come back down to that first
Wow.
peak. And so you've got to continually acclimate,
Hmm.
or she said your head will pop off. She said it kind of in a funny way, but if you don't acclimate and continually come back down,
Yeah,
you're not going to get to where you want to go.
that's
And
good.
and this conversation reminds me of that. We've always, when we get to that peak, we need to remember to come back down and look at the basics that got us there, and remember that they're probably the same type basics that are going to get us to the next peak.
Yeah, I think there's this is a both and conversation in the sense of I feel like you've heard the Marshall Goldsmith, who's like the
Yep.
grandfather of the coaching industry, talks about I think one of his books was called What Got You Here Won't Get You There.
Yes.
And I think both of these things apply at the same time. And look, if we do everything we do as a rookie in whatever we're doing, and we never grow and evolve, we're going to stay a rookie. We're going to be the best rookie,
Yep.
but we'll stay at that novice level. And if we go to become an expert or great at something, and we never do the things we did that got us there, there's going to be a problem. Also, I think I said to you when we were starting out, this reminds me of in basketball when a
Mhm.
player's missing shots or gets in a slump, they don't just take him out and sit him on the bench. They don't, and they might not, they definitely tell them to keep shooting. Like you got to get in the rhythm, you got to keep shooting. But often what we tell, especially young people, is go to the basket. Take the ball back to the basket for like a layup. Do the easiest, kind of most routine thing that you've practiced over and over again.
The muscle memory part of it.
Yeah. Get that like easy layup. Do that a few times and then start stepping back into your shots and your rhythm. And we see that. I mean, you see, if you watch in the NBA, you'll see a guy like LeBron James, like, oh, he's been cold, and then he takes the ball to the basket and gets an easy basket, and all of a sudden
He's
something
back in.
shifts.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that what you're saying is I didn't know that about scaling like or climbing a mountain. I always think about mountains as when you reach the peak, you're up there, you take in the view, you enjoy it. And then you have to come back down to the bottom before you scale your next mountain, right? You don't just keep going up, up, up. At some point you hit the top of the mountain, you got to come down.
Yeah.
And I think of that as like our business metrics or goals. Hey, for a lot of people, it's like I want to hit six figures, right? When they start a business. And that's your first mountain. And when you climb that mountain, when you say then now I want to hit, let's say 500,000, let's say that's your leap.
Mm.
Well, you're going to have to do some things that feel like you're down at the bottom again. And you're probably going to get your butt kicked a little bit in that journey from, 100,000 to 500,000. And the same thing is going to happen between maybe 500,000 and 2 million or whatever those leaps are, right?
Yeah.
There's always coming back down. And I think we forget that the down, that valley that we're in, isn't a bad place. It's just the place that we have to go to before we go up the next mountain.
And that also means, I think, it just brought into mind, we've just finished the 2024 Olympics, right, in Paris. And you look at these athletes that are at the mountain, right? The Olympics are
That's
the mountain, right? So what do they do now? Do they go back and start eating potato chips and soda and relaxing?
Maybe.
But part of that, I think part of that is realizing you've got to reset your goal.
Yeah.
If you're not continually resetting, so if in a BNI chapter, if our goal is 25 and we reach 25, and we've reached our goal and we don't have another goal beyond that, we are going to get complacent and we end up going down.
Yeah, we also need to celebrate in there so much, which is why I was jokingly saying maybe they are eating potato chips and drinking beer and,
which is good. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if it's good to eat potato chips and drink beer, but it's good that they celebrate. But I think a lot of business owners also are not good at that. Yeah. And I think it's almost like the goal line keeps moving, because we get there and then we move it further away, which is in line with what you're saying. We do that because that keeps us making progress moving forward. It keeps us feeling alive and vital and passionate and enthusiastic. But at the same time, if we don't stop, I was telling my wife was watching, I haven't watched it, so I don't, it's the show about the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders.
Oh, yeah.
But at one point she was watching and I walked into the room and there was somebody had scored a touchdown and was doing a touchdown dance. And I looked at my wife and I was like, I think I should start doing touchdown dances every time I have a win in my life. And I was like, can you imagine me at a BNI meeting? Like I get a referral and I get up out of my chair and I do a little touchdown dance. And it's obviously silly. We're probably not going to do that all the time in our life. But what if we did, right? What if we brought that level of enthusiasm, that celebration to different areas of our life? What if we actually learned from wide receivers? Sometimes we give them a hard time because they're very dramatic and like to put on a show. But what if we actually took a lesson from them and celebrated our win so we could actually have a moment of enjoying it and taking a breath before we do exactly what you say, which is set the next thing? Because ultimately, if we just go from goal to goal to goal, that's how people end up working with me in crisis, at 50 years old going, what have I done with the last 30 years of my life? All I've cared about is like making money or hitting goals. And I've done that really well. And I have nothing else. I have no fulfillment or happiness or connections to show for it.
Whoa. That's where to unpack that one. Holy moly. And unfortunately, we see a lot of people get there.
Especially athletes too. You said the Olympians, like what happens after they're done? What if that was their last Olympics? What do they do now?
yeah,
You know?
unless you're Michael Phelps and you've got some,
Well, he went through it though,
yeah,
but
he
remember,
did.
Michael Phelps like had a lot of mental health
Yep.
and no, like no judgment, right? The guy there was just a lot of things with like drugs and whatnot. And hey, who are we to judge someone who's accomplished so much?
Oh my
But I
God.
think it's actually the guy got to the highest mountain possible, and the only place to go is down.
Yeah.
And who's unfortunately, most of us don't know how to come down. And then as we're coming down, we don't know what to do, especially if it's been a big mountain. What do we do next? What mountain do we go climb? Especially if you hit your goal, whatever your big goal was, then what?
So the question in my head that just popped in was, how do you stay grounded then? How do you again when you get to those levels and you celebrate
Yeah.
and then you recalibrate and reset your goal, but and during that, how do you stay grounded? How do what are those things that help people stay grounded?
I think if we don't have a passion or a purpose, we get in trouble.
Hmm.
Just in generally speaking. Now, your passion or your purpose could be an Olympic gold medal, having the biggest dry cleaners in the country. It could also be being the best parent, right? It's not about what it is, but your passion and your purpose is what keeps you alive. I saw a video the other day, which so great to see. Deion Sanders is the football
Yeah.
coach at Colorado.
Yeah.
And I saw a video of Warren Sapp. If people are not football people, Warren Sapp was a defensive lineman, defensive end, I think, for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, like in the 90s, all-star, great player, right? So now he's long retired. And apparently, I didn't know this, he's on Deion Sanders' coaching staff.
Oh,
And they had a mic in front of him. They were interviewing him about what it's like to be a coach right now. And he was lit up. He was just like joy was just oozing out of this giant man. And he said, it's so funny. He calls the college kids that he's coaching at Colorado babies. He's like, these babies are so excited. They're just like sponges. They want to learn from me. They're staying after. They're coming early. He's just and in the video he talks about how he was just sitting on the couch like watching TV. He was like, I was sitting on the couch and I was just watching MSN, just like dulled out basically. And he got this call and he never thought he wanted to coach because his experience was when guys would come into his town like professionals and he would be like, hey, if you want some help with your game, reach out, let me know. And he said they would never reach out.
mm,
The guy at the high, right at the pro
yeah.
level, but the college kids, right, who are in that building phase, and you could see that he found a new passion and purpose, right, in teaching and helping. And so I don't know how you go from being like a Michael Phelps and winning every medal there is to win, or even one medal, right? That would be enough for most of
Oh
us.
yeah.
I don't know how you go from that to finding what your next passion and purpose is, but I can't accept that all of us only have one. There's too many things in this world that are available to us, and there's new things being created every single day that all of us could only have one thing that we're passionate and have purpose around. So to me, if you've had kids and that was your passion and your purpose, and those kids have moved out of your house, it's time to like reinvent
Well,
yourself and create something.
and not that we want to go down this bunny trail, but that's where you see a lot of people get divorced.
Totally. Yeah. Now they get up together.
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
but and bringing that all the way back to business, whether you're in a BNI chapter or you're a successful business person, it's always remembering that periodically it's good to revisit the basics, to go back to, and again, like we talked about, we're not talking about, totally back to the basics, but just doing those things, those exercises, those
Fundamentals.
inviting, like
Yeah.
when we grow a chapter to 25, and I've shared this with chapters, and this, you never stop inviting.
Yeah.
As a professional, we are always going out and prospecting and meeting new clients, whether they're referrals or we're going out on the hunt. if we're not, I don't care how successful you are, you're going to lose clients
Yeah.
for whatever reason, and you always have to replenish.
Yeah. One of my first coaching mentors, this is 2015, I think I was just in the beginning, said to me, I remember I had gotten a client, I was so excited, and I had lost a client, right? Early on that happened a lot. And this coaching mentor, her name's Carrie, she said to me, you better get used to losing clients. And I remember like my heart dropped in that moment because I didn't, what do you mean I better get
Wow.
used to? And she goes, that's what clients do. They come and they go.
Wow.
And it was for years it was hard to lose them, right? I think it's only in years, I want to say 7, 8, and 9 that of my business that I've become comfortable with, hey, when somebody leaves, it's time. It's
Yeah.
actually it's the right thing. But it was hard. That was a hard thing to accept. But I think that, they say like yes lives in the land of no. I don't know if you've ever
Yeah.
heard that, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and I think it's the same thing, right? Like, if you're afraid to let people leave, then you're actually blocking people from coming, also.
Hmm.
It's like we need to let people leave to create the space for new people.
Whoa. That's huge. As a matter of fact, we had our director team meeting a couple of weeks ago, and when one of our team, Ali, shared with the team, sometimes as a chapter or a business professional, we hold on to people too long,
Yeah,
right? Because we want retention. We've always been taught retention is good,
yeah,
which is true. And there is a period of time where it's time for someone to move on, and
yeah.
that's okay.
Is that Ali? Is that Ali in La Jolla
Ali
chapter?
Mirzad,
Yeah, I
who
know
I
Ali.
was just talking to a little earlier today.
He's a brilliant guy. I met him.
His mind, whenever I talk to him, my head just explodes because
I know.
he's just brilliant. So
I
Ali,
know.
we need to get you on the podcast
Yeah.
and chat a little
He
bit.
is a smart man.
So yeah, I mean, again, going back to the basics, right? It's sometimes we hear like, hey, we need to get back to the basics, and you can see a room go, right? What? Why? And we also need to remember that at least in BNI, when a chapter gets back to the basics, there's new people in that room that don't know the basics.
Yeah, just now when you were that like, why do we have to? I was thinking about, when we all get hurt at some point in our
Yep.
life, right? We sprain an ankle, we break something, you know, um, and a lot of us at some point will do physical therapy for one reason or another, right? Some injury. And I think about how tough we sometimes make that.
Mm.
It's no different than this, right? We're like, I already know how to walk, right? I already know how to brush my teeth. I already know how to, but something happened, right? You break your arm and all of a sudden you broke it bad and you got to learn how to do it. There's some version of that applies to this, that there's something about human nature. And I don't know if it might be that we think that we don't have a lot of time, right? We have this time scarcity belief, many of us do, and that, oh, we have to spend our time learning how to walk again or ride a bike again or do this thing, when actually there's a it's a really cool invitation to kind of come back to things that we've neglected,
Hmm.
right? Or things that we've taken for granted. I shared with you before we got on here, one of the things I've done in my business when I was building my business, just like we invite people to BNI, I would invite everyone I met into a experience of working with me. It was like, hey, come have this experience. I'm going to blow your mind. If you want to work with me, great. If you don't want to work with me, that's okay too. And most people would say yes to the experience, right? And the people that were meant to work with me would. And over time, I just stopped making that invitation, right? The people that would do it would be like referrals or whatnot. And what I've noticed is at first I was like, oh, I gotta go make these offers. I gotta find the people. But what I've actually noticed in the last month of playing that game is I feel way more alive. I feel
Hmm.
way more enthusiastic. I feel way more happy. I feel like invigorated because I'm actually doing what I like doing, which is coaching people.
Hmm.
And I'm making a difference and I'm having an impact. And there's people that are leaving going, this is incredible, right? Some work with me, some don't, but they
Yeah.
all leave like, wow, this was really incredible. Thank you. And that's what it was actually all about. That's why I started doing it in the first place, right? And like, so that relearning to walk also brought me back to why I actually started walking in the first place.
Well, that's a that's a good point right there, right? It brings us back to what's the term? Uh oh, and it just went right out of my head. I hate when that happens. But the reminding, sometimes we need to be reminded. The term is remember what remember what you got to remember what made you fall in love to begin with.
It's ironic that you couldn't remember the thing that starts with remember. It's
But
good.
sometimes we need to go again, not that we want to go down this bunny trail, but when people are struggling, I've watched therapists when people are in the process of going through a divorce, they'll
Yeah.
take them back to that stage of what got you started dating in the first place. What are those things
Yeah.
and getting, and sometimes, and I was just talking to someone recently about our season members, because in San Diego, we have a couple of people that are coming up on their 30th anniversary
Wow.
in their same chapter.
Wow.
And
Well, BNI
sometimes
started here in San Diego, right?
no, it started in the Upper Inland Empire
Oh,
in
okay.
Arcadia.
Okay.
We were one of the first expanded areas.
Okay.
But we have two chapters that are turning 30 in November, and
Wow.
we've got founding members in both chapters.
Wow.
And sometimes, again, it's
Incredible.
easy when you've been in a chapter that long to sit back on your laurels, right? I've been there, done that. I'm going to let the new members do that.
Yeah.
And sometimes we need to remember why we fell in love with each other in the first place.
Yeah. As a newly married person who's been married for about a year and a half, uh, somebody gave me this advice, and I think you can take this to marriage, you could take this to business. Um, they said every day when you roll over, you get to choose how you think about your partner. So you can roll over and look at them and think about why you love them, and then choose to love them. Because in the moment, you might not feel like you love them, but you get to choose to love them regardless of how you feel. And I started a practice with my wife where I always wake up before her. She is not a morning person, and I am, and I wake up and I get myself ready. And then right before I leave the bedroom, I go over to her side and I kiss her on her cheek and I tell her I love her. Sometimes she sleeps right through it. Sometimes she mumbles, I love you back. And I do it every day. Some days I don't feel like some days we might have gotten in a little tiff or whatever the night before. Or maybe I'm not feeling great. That's not what I necessarily want to be, but it's like every day I do that. And it just reminds me that my relationship is a choice that I recreate every day.
Oh my gosh.
And and the same thing can exist in your business, right? You could walk into your office every day and walk into the fire or the storm, or you could walk in and go, I love you.
Mm.
Thank you for all you've created or provided for me. And you get to make that choice. You can do
Mm.
that with your customers, with your BNI group.
Oh my gosh. That's a whole nother podcast right there. Because I actually just as you were talking, I thought about a phrase that a friend of mine shared with me years ago. And I relate it to business as well. I share it with in during training and whatnot. And the phrase is, when's the best time to tell your spouse you love them?
Mm,
And most people go, oh, right now, every day, all whatever. And you can equate that to your customer. When's the best time to tell your customer you appreciate them? And the answer is before somebody else does.
mm.
Think about that.
Yeah,
When's the best time to
yeah.
tell your spouse you love them? Well, before somebody else does. Or when's the best time to reconnect with your client
Mhm.
and tell them thank you before
Yeah,
somebody else does?
yeah, yeah.
Okay. We can go on between the two of us, we could go on all kinds of bunny trails. So let's bring it back. And Alex, like we do in every one of our conversations, if we want to leave a tidbit with our listeners on this element of um, you're never too successful for the basics, what would you share with them?
Think about why you started and do that thing. For me, it was I wanted to coach and have an impact. I wanted to say things to people that no one else would tell them that would serve them and be supportive of whatever they wanted.
Mm.
And now I just get to go practice doing that. And that builds my business. That's all. That's actually all that there is to do.
That's awesome. That is a fantastic way to end our show today. Alex, thank you for joining us as always.
Thanks.
I'm looking forward to our next conversation because they're always good. And for our listeners, thank you for joining us today. Make sure that you join us again next week for another amazing guest on our show. And to all of our local BNI people here in San Diego, we've got a shout out to you. And particularly today, a shout out to Ali Mirzad, who is in BNI La Jolla. Great guy. If you haven't met with him, just spending a few minutes with him and he'll blow your mind on just the way he thinks and bring things up. So make sure you have an opportunity to meet Ali and tell him I told you to say hello. Thanks everyone and have a great afternoon.
This episode of the BNI San Diego podcast has been brought to you by Cruise Productions, a San Diego-based video production company and proud BNI member. You can find us at the intersection where business and creativity meet, or online at cruiseproductionsinc.com.